Hello there and good evening and a very warm welcome to my YouTube. I'm going to take a look at Kingsbridge Railway Station. Opened in 1893 and it involves some 48 bridges. The line had been completed at an estimated cost of £180,000. The line was 12 miles long and the cost of each station, Kingsbridge came at £2,720, Avonwick was £855, Garra Bridge was £955 and Loddiswell £880. The official opening took place on the 19th of December 1893 and most people were determined to really enjoy the event, and we're not really sure of the weather conditions on the day, but the GWR, the Great Western Railway, had allocated 1,000 free tickets to Kingsbridge, but no children were allowed to ride on the trains. It therefore meant that at least one member per household could enjoy a ride up to South Brent and back. The first train of the day was from Brent, leaving at 8:45, and the station signal box and village were gaily decorated with evergreen flags and bunting. The train was given a rousing send-off from Brent, and the next station along the line was Avonwick, where a small crowd from Ditford and Avonwick greeted the arrival of the train, and a similar reception was again accorded at Garra Bridge, Loddiswell and finally Kingsbridge. It was an ambitious project, fraught with all sorts of problems, not least was the raising of the necessary funds, and after a short time many proposals were dropped. However, the GWR did consider building an extension on from Kingsbridge to Salcombe in the 1920s, but by then the motor bus had provided satisfactory traffic and it was nicely developing and no further proposals were made. Regrettably, Salcombe was never reached by railway, probably due to the major works required. The proposed route followed the west bank of the Kingsbridge estuary, necessitating a major viaduct from Gurston Point to Heath Point, across Collipit Lake and Blanks Lake, in addition to fairly substantial cuttings and embankments, although excavation had started on the station site at Salcombe. This operational view is known of a mixed train, and the rear two vehicles being a cattle wagon and a brake van. The track in the foreground was part of the proposed route to Salcombe, but this was later removed. And then another image here, an A-Class 455-240T has just arrived at Kingsbridge, and passengers emerge through the gate and pass to the coach that carries the words Salcombe to Kingsbridge. It will presumably carry folk in other directions as well. And then there's some bystanders looking on for their friends that are arriving. The film footage coming up in colour here is very rare and is from the late 1950s, and you'll see 5573 getting ready and the platform looking quite resplendent. There is also, coupled with this colour footage, some overhead shots from the 1930s that show the complete station. Also visible here is the signal box and the station master's car outside the main station building. There were major improvements made with the addition of a bay platform. This one was lengthened at the same time and the loop was extended. Staff levels increased from 10 in 1913 to 16 in 1923. And by 1934 the staff levels were at 25. Great Western Railway was a pioneer with road motors, starting in 1903. The first service from Kingsbridge was to Salcombe, commencing on the 21st of July 1909. Modbury followed on the 14th of October, Dartmouth on the 30th of June 1919, and eventually Plymouth on the 25th of March 1921. Others followed and all became part of the Great Western Railway sponsored Western National. Great Western Railway magazine of 1907 stated, "Rabbits are usually plentiful in the west of England, but this year they have been exceptionally so. Kingsbridge is a busy centre for rabbit traffic, and trappers and farmers and dealers bring their large quantities of rabbits that are packed in hampers which hold from 20 to 24 and weigh about 100 weight. The parcels traffic luggage was quite heavy, and the traffic in fish and rabbits, as we've heard, was considerable. As much as 25 tons of crabs and lobsters were loaded each week into wagons. They were dispatched to London, Billingsgate, Birmingham and to Southampton for the ocean liners. It's interesting to look at the integrity and the position of the station master at a station like Kingsbridge, and the duties of a station master covered all aspects of operations: the locomotive department, the goods department, signal box and the daily commercial life of the station. He in fact was the company GWR to the local community, and his character, honesty, integrity and bearing were essential for good relationships, not only with the public, but perhaps more essential, keeping the staff under control. It was imperative that he kept himself informed of all daily movements, especially handling of goods. There was a considerable traffic in livestock for the weekly market on a Wednesday, and of course his judgment, trucks had to be available to move animals away from the market. During the course of his duties, he was expected to ensure the smooth running of the station, visiting each department daily. He was required to visit the signal box and inspect the train register. After the last recorded entry and other duties were fulfilled, and the copies of the rule book were issued to the staff and were kept up to date with all amendments. All monies collected or paid out by the station were his responsibility to ensure dispatch and details further to his position. He was expected by the company to seek new business and also play an active part in the local Chamber of Commerce. Kingsbridge being in the holiday area, it was essential that full details of the cheap fares, holiday runabout tickets and luggage in advance facilities were available to the public. Also, the company's publication, Holiday Haunts, had to be sold, and hoteliers, guest house owners were encouraged to take advertising space. The station master was responsible for ordering and supplying staff coal and collecting and accounting for the monies due. National savings was also very popular, particularly during the war years, and the station master became secretary of the Great Western Railway and Western National Staff Savings Groups. Having to account for and record transactions of some 50 members was no mean task. The station master had to check all payments claimed for overtime arising from staff shortages and to account for the petty cash disbursements. In addition to these extra duties, the station master had to be very patient in dealing with all the service organisations, especially when a build-up of traffic occurred. There was room for some 120 wagons at Kingsbridge, and at times the figure was exceeded, and the wagons were held at stations further up the branch line, and even at Brent. As an example of this full capacity, in one weekend 120 wagons of steel runway were received and unloaded by staff for the RAF, the empties being returned to general service. It must be remembered that the local traffic still had to be handled. Traffic increased incredibly when the outbreak of the Second World War came, and special goods trains had to run daily, leaving Brent at about 10 a.m. to convey additional traffic passing to Kingsbridge. Additional traffic also arrived on mixed trains. Outward, they were loaded and empty wagons were cleared by 11:50 a.m. Kingsbridge goods or mixed trains or a special unless Brent is congested and unable to accept. There are sidings accommodation at Kingsbridge for about 78 wagons. Dieselisation of the passenger service came in the spring of 1961 in the form of a single unit rail car built by Gloucester Railway Carriage and Wagon Company, being a motor brake, the first to arrive at Kingsbridge being number W5017, and the last regular booked steam freight was working as late as the 11th of July 1962, and the diesel units were serviced at Newton Abbot. Rumours of closure were rife as early as the summer of 1962, so to the saddened onlooker it seems as if there were a deliberate policy of running down the branch, particularly as over the previous 2 years connections had become poor and travellers had to wait longer when they were trying to make a connection at Brent Station. The background to the future of the line at this time needs to be seen against the problems of British Railways Board, which they faced at this time under its chairman Dr. Richard Beeching. Over the whole of Britain, the development of the road system and the increase of both freight, vehicles and private cars was starting to undermine seriously the economic base of the national railway system. Dr. Beeching took a major initiative with the support of the government, which aimed at ensuring that money and effort were directed to those parts of the system which everyone was certain had a long-term future and reasonable hopes of making a profit. Thus, the branch lines at Kingsbridge Line was as many. They had to justify their future in terms of the branch revenue and cost. The evaluation systems used to seem very, very harsh to those who saw their local lines as valuable feeders to the main lines. Upon hearing of the threat of closure, the local branch of ASLEF printed and distributed leaflets headed "No Railways for Kingsbridge," calling for a public protest, adding that the closure would mean the death of the South Hams. The local Chamber of Trade said that they had anticipated the closure and were very unhappy at losing the railway, a view that was also held by the local councils. This leaflet culminated in a public meeting on the 29th of June 1962, attended by 120 people. The resolve of the meeting was to organise a petition against closure and to seek the support of the local authorities. And the petition read, "We, the undersigned, being residents of the South Hams, are asking to suspend the call not to close the railway line until there has been a full public inquiry into the circumstances. And we hereby petition the Ministry of Transport that rather than close the Kingsbridge Branch line, please to take steps to increase the passenger service, improve the efficiency of the service and make additional efforts to make the railway service more economic." Devon County Council objected strongly to a piecemeal closure of branch line and hoped that any decision on this branch line closing would be deferred until the government had reviewed its overall railway plan in 1963, taking the view that once the line is closed, it would be more difficult to reopen. British Railways had stated that Totnes would be the railhead for the South Hams, and the Western National Omnibus would run in the region of 6 through services to Salcombe via Kingsbridge from Totnes, with British Rail hiring the buses for exclusive use of rail passengers. Severe winter at the beginning of January 1963, the railway came into its own again. The roads were blocked, but the railway continued to function. Driver Canham and a guard, both of Kingsbridge, were a welcome sight to the isolated farmers of the South Hams. A train loaded with essential supplies departed from Kingsbridge, calling at all stations, including Topsham Bridge, Bickham Bridge, and groceries, bread, animal foodstuffs and fuel were left along the line for redistribution by tractors and sledges. The last day of full steam-operated passenger services was Saturday the 10th of April 1961. But a diesel car set, in fact, had worked the last down passenger on the Saturday evening, the 8:45 from Brent. However, due to the late running of the Penzance-Manchester train, which connected with the branch train departure, it was delayed until 9:15. On busy Saturdays, steam did run extra services. The last booked-up steam working hauled by the 4561 was the 7:30 p.m. from Kingsbridge, and to make its last steam run, members of the Kingsbridge Model Engineering Club travelled to Brent and back. The last down train arrived, and it composed of a two-car. It was adorned with a wreath, but the coaches were not clean. As the full load of passengers detrained, a Scandinavian film crew also recorded the scene. Despite the sad occasion, some 160 people turned out to travel on the last passenger train. The civic party was led by Chairman of Kingsbridge Urban District Council, Councillor W.J. Lewis, together with representatives of Kingsbridge Rural District Council. Two notable travellers on that day were a Mr. Stidson and Nunn, who had travelled on the first day of the train in December 1893. The train was scheduled to depart at 5:33 p.m. and in true Great Western Railways fashion, attached to the rear of the train was a fish van containing 2 tons of fresh fish. Small but very dedicated band of local folk, it was their life. It was a friendly line. In the early years, one driver, Bob Hine, fixed his engine whistle, and this would emit his own particular signal, so that when he was passing the village of Loddiswell, his family home, the family would be aware he would soon be home. And naturally, with the line running for such a distance alongside the River Avon, which was a notable salmon river, many a fishing tale can be told. It was once said that the construction navvies destroyed the salmon with explosives as a relaxation from blasting through the Sawley Tunnel. Many up-country folk came up for the sport. Bailiffs were employed by the landowners, and they patrolled their respective beats, and poaching was rife and very lucrative. It was not long before the enterprising poacher chatted up the engine crews, asking them to notify him when the bailiffs were patrolling by an advance warning system. This worked very well. A whistle system was perfected, and the crew was suitably rewarded, and all were very happy. Movement within the South Hams during the early years was very restricted, and people relied on foot or horse for moving about. The first coach service began in 1824, operated by Robert Thole of Kingsbridge, departing from the King's Arms in Fore Street. With the opening of the South Devon Railway in 1848, these coaches met the trains at the Kingsbridge Road Station, which is at Rangerton. A steamer service also began in the 1860s, operated by the Kingsbridge Packet Company, running twice weekly to Plymouth, calling at Salcombe. Later, a daily coach service ran between Dartmouth and Kingsbridge, starting from the Anchor Hotel and connecting with Kingswear trains, running 3 times a day. Very little changed in the way of transport until the railway arrived at Kingsbridge in 1893, and with the introduction of the motor bus in 1909 by the Great Western Railway, moving from one place to another became much easier. The steamer service to Plymouth continued to run into the 20th century, and also with the arrival of the railway, the South Hams became very attractive to holiday makers, and the tourist industry really began to develop. It's been over 60 years now since Kingsbridge lost its railway station, and all the infrastructure, sadly, has gone. Most of the small structures on the branch were destroyed by the scrap contractors and later by souvenir hunters. The Kingsbridge and Garrow Bridge signal boxes were completely destroyed. The only gleaming levers and frames and locking devices lay as a tangled heap of scrap metal. Kingsbridge Station site is now completely destroyed, and the only remaining building is the goods building, and that now is a listed Grade 2. Kingsbridge Railway Station site is no more. It's covered by an industrial estate, and even the main station building has gone, lost in 2009. I really hope you found this short film of some interest, having a brief look back at the Kingsbridge Railway Station site. Do take the greatest of care, and I look forward to seeing you on the next film. All the very best. Cheers for now.